files, after speaking to you, after speaking to police officers, and we find that there is not a pattern or practice of unconstitutional conduct, then our investigation is going to end. But if our investigation does reveal problems, then what we will do is work cooperatively with the city to try to reach some sort of agreement that will address the constitutional violations that we found. I think one last thing that I'd like to say before I turn it back over to Rachel is that a lot of times we have questions about how long our particular pattern of practice investigations will take. We can't really provide you with a precise time frame or timeline under which our investigation will conclude. We want to make sure that our investigation is as thorough and as detailed as possible. But at the same time, we all know that everyone involved in this process wants for our investigation to include expeditiously as possible. And so we try to balance those two interests when conducting our investigation. So at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Rachel.
Excellent. So as you heard Nicole say, we're going to speak with community, we're going to speak with the police, we're going to speak with command staff of the police, leadership of the police unions, but also individuals. We've set up a hotline for people to call. This meeting is happening a few hours after we issued the press release. We are going to have more community meetings because we know that was a really short time period for people to come out. We are still in the middle of the workday, or near the end, I hope, of your workday. But we wanted you to hear from us and not just read in the news what it is that was happening. I'd love it, Michelle, if you have any other things that you think we should be alerting the community to.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate what Rachel and Nicole said, we can't really conduct a thorough investigation without developing relationships with you all and hearing from you all. We do a really thorough review of police department reports and investigative files, but that limits our investigation to what's actually written down. You all will know about a lot more outside of those paper documents. So we look forward to getting to know you all better. I think everyone here clearly somehow got an invitation with the Zoom info to this meeting, which is great. But if you did not directly get the email with the information, I'll put our email address and our hotline number up in the chat so folks can email us directly to get added to our email distribution list. Thank you.
Excellent. So I wonder whether, are there people, if you want to type into the chat, are there questions that we can answer? I know it's very early on. The press release, I believe, is on our website, and there is, or Michelle, I don't know if you can put a link. It is a public document, so you can see how our office has the specific words we used in describing what it is that we've done. This has been approved by the Department of Justice and Nicole's team in DC, as well as our office as well, and has the information in writing there as well. What I'd like you guys to realize is that we have two of these happening. Springfield, Massachusetts, we are at the end, or we've gone through this process with Springfield announcing a pattern or practice investigation a couple years ago. And then very shortly after I started as U.S. Attorney, we entered into a consent decree or a settlement agreement with them. And now they have a monitor and are working toward, with the very capable Michelle, working toward getting compliant with all of the suggestions made by the Department of Justice, or all the findings that we had, and getting up to, I would say, the gold standard that we should be requiring of law enforcement. So we have done this before in this district. And then we also, again, just to mention what Nicole does, we have the capable and watchful eye of DOJ, who is aware of all of the other investigations they have happening around the country. Louisville, Kentucky, Louisiana, there's some investigations. New York, California has some as well, just to make sure that we are doing the same thing here as is required across our country. So those were my statements. Michelle, I think we have a couple, you put some things in the chat. Do people have questions about what we've said thus far, the consent decree, or I'm sorry, the investigation that we've opened, or anything about Springfield? I know we're putting a lot to you, but we currently have 2 right now in our Commonwealth. And if you don't have questions, that's fine. This is not the last time you're going to see us. We are going to make sure that we're having a few more community, or several more community forums where if I'm in the district, I will be attending those, not just with Michelle and our team here, but I will be there as the U.S. Attorney. And usually there's also a counterpart from the Department of Justice as well, whether that's Nicole or Paul or someone else on their team. You don't have to have questions, but if you do, oh, sir, Fred Taylor, were you waving at somebody, or do you have a question?
No, I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
Good to see you again. So the Facebook page, the Worcester Police has a Facebook page. I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not, but that could be a good place to start looking for some of the stuff that you are maybe looking for.
Very helpful.
And if anyone's brought that up to you yet or not.
Michelle?
Thank you for alerting us to that. Is there anything in particular you've seen on the Facebook page that gives you concern?
I don't recall any direct, like they're police officers. So, a lot of them are really smart, but a lot of times when you read things, you can reference a lot of stuff, especially during the George Floyd, in the crest of that in 2020, there was a lot of stuff that a lot of people in the community were very uncomfortable with, the things that were being posted on that website.
Very helpful, Fred. Thank you. Is there anyone else that might have a question? And Fred or Kevin just put that in the chat. So I'm trying to go between pages. If you guys really know how to do this, you can use the little hand emoji that goes up, or you can just wave in your box or unmute yourself and speak.
I'm on a phone, not able to do all those. So
okay.
I want to know, is this being recorded, or is all the information that you've just shared with us written up someplace? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, how do we protect the anonymity of people who'd like to speak with you? Not many of us want to necessarily make ourselves very visible to the police department as people concerned about their conduct and behavior. And then I also want to suggest that there are folks in Worcester. I know I respect Attorney Rollins very much and the Justice Department for what they're trying to do here. I don't know how much you've got on the ground in Worcester, connections with the many community organizations and individual leaders who have been raising these kinds of issues, been responding to these kinds of concerns, but who probably didn't know about this, because I only found out about it an hour ago. So just those are my 3 questions.
Excellent. So let me start backwards. So I agree with you. There's a Department of Justice policy where they don't notify the community prior to the announcement. And, again, like, I think certain communities that works very well for, where, we give you 2-hour to 3-hour notice that we'd like you to be at a meeting later this afternoon, and you are permitted to do that because your schedule so allows. Many communities that are impacted by what it is we're looking into, have jobs or children or other things and lives that require a lot of movement prior to being able to attend a meeting. So I hear you, and part of why we are going to continue having more community engagement meetings in the very near future is so anyone that didn't get to come today is going to be able to attend by Zoom, or maybe some in person as well. So that's number 1. Number 2, we have a hotline number. And although the voicemail message, Michelle, may say, please leave your name and number, we would rather get information anonymously than no information at all, right? And so, with respect to the individual that just shared that little nugget of information about the Facebook page, we have multiple hotline numbers here in the office. There's one specific to civil rights, which this would fall under that category. If you are not comfortable leaving your name, you do not have to leave your name or number, but leave as much information about what you would like us to look into as possible. So that's 2. And number 3, we are not recording this meeting right now. And if we were going to be recording, I would make sure that we alerted people that we were going to record this for our own sort of edification. I will make sure that the chats, though, if we have information in there, I think most of well, no, that's not true. Michelle put in a lot of things. Some other individuals have put in information. Michelle, if we could just either take a screenshot of just the chat so we save that. But as far as we're not sharing, sir, the names in the background of that. We just want to make sure we keep the questions and the information if we have to respond to people. Did I miss a question? Can you let me know if there was something I didn't answer?
No, you did an excellent job. The other point was just Fred and others who are on this call could be extremely helpful in putting the department and your office in touch with a wide range of advocacy groups, individual leaders, community involved folks. So there isn't the U.S. Attorney's Office specifically in Worcester, so you wouldn't necessarily have those relationships, and Fred would be a great starting point.
Yeah, so we actually do. Our main office is in Boston for sure, but we have a physical location in Worcester and a physical location in Springfield. But what I want to say is, even though the majority of the people investigating this are seated and housed in Boston, we are going. I drove to Worcester, earlier today. It is a 45-minute drive. We can get to Worcester. And what we need to do is make sure that these investigations only work if we do have good relationships with stakeholders and community leaders, irrespective of their sort of history or relationship with law enforcement. We want information. That's what we're interested in, to make sure that we can conduct a very thorough investigation. So that is helpful. We will make sure that Fred and the other people, Fred, that we will be reaching out to get more information from them about the community groups that we are reaching out to. And then obviously, if you receive an email from us, we would welcome you passing that along to other stakeholders or information. This is not a sort of secret society. We want this information out so that we can get it to as many impacted people as possible. All right, I see somebody whose name, keeping it 100, Ron Liddell. Can you, your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
I do. First, I want to thank you for driving to Worcester and proving that if you go outside 128, the world doesn't end.
Okay, Ron, move on. Yes.
My question is, how does an investigation like this get initiated?
Great call. So, Nicole, can you talk about the different ways? We can tell you how this one did, but there are several ways that Nicole's group, and remember, as powerful as I may believe that I am as the U.S. Attorney, I can't open one of these on my own. I can certainly have great people that work in my office to say, look, we think we need to look into this. And I may say, I agree. I am obligated to go to Nicole's exceptional group in DC that handles these type of cases around the country. And they ask us tons of questions. They have to approve the opening of this type of investigation. But Nicole, why don't I turn it to you to talk about maybe generally how these are opened, the ways that they can come to you, or whether you can initiate, or whether a U.S. Attorney's Office can initiate, or a community or somebody else.
Sure, there are multiple ways that we determine how to open an investigation and the sources that we look at. It's really mostly publicly available information. That could be newspaper articles that talk about incidents that happen in a particular jurisdiction. It could be reports that are issued by academics or community groups detailing problems. It could be complaints that are filed with our office or with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm talking about incidents. But we look at all of these different things to determine whether an investigation into that particular police department should be open. And a lot of times with our investigations, we don't just open them by ourselves, meaning the Civil Rights Division. We work in tandem with the U.S. Attorney's Office, because we know that they are based in those areas. They have really good sources and really good information about the particular problems and issues that are in the area, and they can help us do a more fuller and comprehensive investigation and reach out to community members who have information about the incidents and the problems that are going on in a particular jurisdiction. So it's really just looking at publicly available information and complaints that are filed with our office, and that's really the way that we decide whether investigation should be open.
Yeah, and what's great is, so real examples of what Nicole's saying is, remember Freddie Gray in Baltimore, right? There might have been charges brought by the DA or the state's attorney there and acquittals, but there ended up being a full investigation by the Department of Justice into that police department, whether that came from the DA or whether that came from the Department of Justice reading about the case or watching, learning through, as Nicole said, publicly open source information to say, we think we need to look into something like this. Ferguson, there were inquiries after Michael Brown and situations like that as well. I want to make sure I am going to go to some of the people whose hands are raised, but there was a really good question in the chat. Does the city of Worcester's failure to take corrective measures fall under your investigation? So one of the things Nicole's team as well as our team together is going to be looking at when they cull through those, Nicole, likely thousands and thousands of pages of documents or body-worn cameras or all the different things that they are going to look at, policies and procedures, et cetera, is one of the areas of inquiry generally, and I'll turn it over to Nicole to explain, is, let's say hypothetically, let's take it away from Worcester. A complaint comes into a police department and they don't, their policy requires that they do A, B, and C when a complaint comes in, and they aren't following their own policies. Or even if there is no policy, just generally speaking, what did they do when a complaint came in? Did they take it seriously? How quickly did they move? One of the things the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office can do at the end of an investigation is either say, you don't have any policies on this and you need some, so we're going to request that you do that, right? When we reach a settlement agreement with you or what have you. Or you do have policies and procedures that are actually quite good, but no one's following them, and there's no audit function or oversight to make sure that people actually do what they're supposed to. Nicole, do you have anything to add to that or examples of that?
Yeah, well, I think, what we really look at whether there are constitutional violations. We're looking at whether, jurisdictions, officers within those jurisdictions are using excessive force. We're looking at whether they're engaging in discriminatory policing. And then we're also looking at what were the factors, if there is a violation, what were the factors that contribute to that violation? What were the deficient systems in place that were essentially what we call the moving force behind those violations? And that's where we look at the accountability systems. And as the person in the chat mentioned, like the failure to take corrective measures, the failure to take to hold officers accountable. And so we're going to be looking at how the police department investigates their officers, whether they hold them accountable, whether they issue discipline if the officer has violated the law or policy. So those are things that we will be looking at in the course of our investigation. And in each of our investigations that we do with all of our jurisdictions, we not only look to see if there's violations, but we try to look for the deficiencies in the systems that led to that violation, because we really want to change those systems. We feel as though that is the way that we're going to get at true reform, not by looking at individual officers. Our investigation is an investigation, as Rachel stated, that focuses on individual officers. So we're looking at pattern or practices of misconduct and systemic deficiencies within the way the police department operates and investigates them.
Right. And so even though right now we're opening it under gender, race, discrimination, or excessive force, somebody asked the question, will your investigation include how the Worcester WPD investigates hate crimes? We want whatever information you are giving us, even though we opened it under, gender, race, discrimination, or excessive force. If people are giving us information about other things, we're going to be speaking to Nicole and Paul and her group saying, hey, we are also hearing a lot about the following. Is that something, what are we looking into? We just want as much information as possible about things that you have concerns about, and you can leave it to the Department of Justice in DC or here at the U.S. Attorney's Office to sort of bundle those into the different categories that we started with, and whether we find many things there or nothing there, or whether we find other things that lead us down a different path, we're going to go where the facts lead us. There's somebody else that mentioned.
Yes, if I may.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Derek, really quickly. Let me just, and I promise we'll let you go. There's some, and Michelle, just to make sure that this chat, when we end, the chat is gone. So if we can just make sure somebody is taking screenshots or saving the chat, not recording what everyone's done, but I want to make sure we answer those questions. Derek, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Why don't you go?
Oh, no problem. I apologize if I interrupted you. Thank you for coming. In 1998, I issued a U.S. Department of Justice. They came down to help me when the police was harassing me. I still got the young man's card that be able to assist me through this movement. But my name is Derek Kaiser. I'm the CEO and founder of Fresh Start Wellness Center. We implement mental health programs in the criminal justice educational system. We do that through our 4 pillars of self-care, life skills, community involvement, and intervention and prevention. Not only am I the founder of Fresh Start, I'm also the co-founder of the first gang out here in Worcester, Massachusetts. We started all this wild stuff. And, 25 years ago, I found myself locked up, incarcerated in the Worcester House Correction, read a book, turned my life around, gave my life to God. 25 years later, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I go all around the country telling brothers and sisters to put away your pride and your ego and come get some of this help. I also was able to attain 386 individual jobs, 184 individuals for mental health services, and 48 individuals with vocational educational readiness. And the reason why I'm just saying this to you is that I've been involved with the Worcester Police my whole life, my juvenile and my adult life. The Chief of Police, Steve Sargent, he was head of the gang task force. I was a gang leader for over close to 20 years. I know exactly what's going on in this police system. I've been involved I run diversion programs with the district attorney early. I run programs inside the jail with Sheriff Lou. I had the first black captain of the head of the internal affairs. He's also was the president of my board at Fresh Start. For the past 4 years, I've been building relationships between community and law enforcement, trying to bring division instead of getting all this division, bringing us together around mental health and their health. Law enforcement's suicide rate is off the chain just as much as everybody else's. Their health is very important because if their health ain't right, how do you think they're affecting the community? So what I've been doing is trying to build relationships, creating programs and bringing people together. But at the same time, I deal with individuals who I call the forgotten community. These are individuals in the substance disorder, gang members, homeless, et cetera, et cetera. I deal with close to 200 to 300 individuals a week, all with a diverse stories, diverse things. And they all have a story when it comes to involving the police because the police involves with themselves with them. A lot of these individuals, we got that no snitching rule. So where even they consider talking about the police is considering snitching. There's so many other factors that's preventing these individuals from coming to the platform and letting you know what the Worcester Police are doing. Now, I'm not trying to hear break out the Worcester Police and talk all bad about them. A lot of people say I advocate too much for them. I'm here to bring us together, but the only way to bring us together is do the wrongs. I know what's going on in that system. Steve knows I know the police that's been here from the beginning. They root their career on trying to arrest me and deal with me. I know exactly what's going on in the streets because these young men and women are telling me just the same way they probably telling Nikki, just the same way they probably telling Fred and the other individuals that's really knows what's going on in this community. But at the same time, I got a bunch of police officers that are friends. My goal isn't after the police officer. My goal is to change the system. We got to stop this, continue to repeat the systems. And it's about the training. It's about the union. It's about the ways that these old folks want to continue to slap the old wheel down and keep the system going. So there's a lot of things that we've been doing at Fresh Start to be able to build relationships, but at the same time, help the individuals get through the law enforcement. I got individuals mandated by court to come to my places. So I would love to sit down and with you and connect with you a whole lot more and be able to really show you what's going on here in the city of Worcester from my view. And I'm definitely connected in many, many ways. So
thank you for that. We appreciate it. There was some other question about, or in the chat, about the fact that some of the websites or Facebook pages have been scrubbed, but individuals have screenshots. So if you call the number or email and look into or reach out to the team, that I believe the information about contacting us is in the chat as well. If you have those screenshots, those are things that we're going to be looking at. There's somebody with a phone number with their hand up, a 508 number. I won't say the rest of the number out loud, but has a hand raised. Is there a question about the investigation today? Okay. And there's a person named Brad. Is there a question about the press release today or?
Hi, Rachel.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Good.
So I don't know if you remember me, but I'm a reporter with the Telegram and Gazette, and had been at the kickoff meeting that you held last year. So I don't know. I actually did give Christina a call. I haven't heard back from her. I don't know if are you able to, can I ask you a question now? I know it's kind of the format isn't, it's not a press conference, but if it's okay, could I ask you a question?
Sure. Is it about the Worcester situation? Yeah.
So obviously from our perspective, obviously kind of the first question that I think I've seen a couple people ask it in the chat is always just kind of, why is that happening? And I know obviously from listening to Nicole, it sounds like, obviously you may not be able to say exactly, every little thing, but I think, just might be interesting to see if you might be able to, give us a little more information. I know that it did say based on information provided to the Justice Department, we find significant justification to investigate. I don't know whether you might be able to just, offer a little bit more detail on that point.
For sure.
And what kind of information.
Yes. And I do remember you, Brad. So yes. And if you see, I think the statement that Kristen Clark gave us a little more kind of detail about, remember, we are at the beginning of an investigation. We are going to go where the facts find us. However, in order for us to even open an investigation, there had to be like a mini investigation. And I'll turn it over to Nicole to sort of explain that generally. What that usually is, Brad, is either open source information, so the media matters when you write, generally speaking, stories about incidents involving the police or, circumstances where an individual might have claimed excessive force. We might be looking at settlements that a city, and let's take it away from Worcester for a minute, because remember, we also have Springfield involved, but you can look, Brad, other places. I'd mentioned Louisville, Kentucky. We've mentioned Ferguson. What are the open source pieces of information that the Department of Justice, and we are part of them, or the U.S. Attorney's Office is reading in the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, or is reading in the Globe or the Herald, or is quite frankly reading on blogs, or having community members, like Nikki or other people that are speaking out about encounters maybe that they've had, positive encounters or ones that need to be improved upon, right? We are taking all of those things, and then ultimately my really smart staff with Michelle and Jennifer Seraphin and others, Greg on this call as well, and Millette, are then saying, okay, you know what, we think there might be some there enough to at least start a full investigation, but then they have to come to me and I have to say, okay, right, we have write it all up, and then we have to send it down to Nicole's team, who then looks not just at what we're dealing with, but quite frankly, Nicole, and you can share this, maybe what's happening around the country, right? What are we looking at here with the limited resources we have? Which ones is the Department of Justice going to give resources to assist us with? Nicole, do you have an answer you can help with this or add to what Brad just asked?
Right. Well, I can say that we look at a number of jurisdictions in determining whether we should open an investigation. Not all jurisdictions that we look into, we decide to open an investigation, but it is a process that we go through with a number of jurisdictions. And over the years, we've opened about 80 investigations since 1994, and there are about 18,000 jurisdictions out there. So we have opened a number of investigations since the beginning of our statute. And some of the things that we look at in terms of opening an investigation is really just the nature of the allegation, the seriousness of the allegations, and then also whether we have resources available to conduct a particular investigation in that jurisdiction. And so we can't go into specifically the reasons why we open an investigation of any police department, but it's a careful consideration of the publicly available information that we receive. And again, and also just weighing those other factors in terms of the number of allegations, the seriousness of the allegations, and our ability to provide the resources that we need to open a full investigation and look into that department more closely.
Yeah, and Brad, what happens, and you can see this by looking at what's happened elsewhere, is we're sort of loud in the beginning, right? Hey, we're just opening an investigation, and then, we sort of go underwater for a while. And, if the press were to ask, which they always do, do you have any comments? What's going on? We usually say it's an open investigation. We have nothing to report right now. And then we come up for water at the end. And Brad, if you look into what happened right after I started January 10th of 2022, Kristen Clark, the head of the Civil Rights Division for the entire Department of Justice, flew up to Springfield with me, and we had a press conference about the fact that we had reached a consent decree or a settlement agreement with the city of Springfield. We usually are loud in the beginning and loud at the end. And remember, we're going to go where the facts take us. We've made no determination yet, but I do want to be clear. We've inquired and looked around a bit, but without the full magnifying glass and without the full weight of the Department of Justice. And we will continue to do that, but we will be loud whether there is a finding or not. We're going to make sure we alert you at the end when we know what we know. Okay? Let me make sure. There were a couple really good comments in the chat. There were individuals that asked, and appropriately so, we are not only going to do things by Zoom. Michelle, I think we need to make sure that we have language capacity. If there are other meetings that we are having and there are individuals that need or require or want and prefer, because I always say, I don't want you understanding 82% of what I'm saying. We want you to 100% in whatever language you're most comfortable hearing information in. We'll make sure that we are getting translators as necessary. And this is going to require us, I think, to have good relationships with community. And then additionally, if there are individuals with housing insecurity or people that work nights, or have other situations where this time doesn't work for them, I'd like to offer some in-person opportunities to meet with community that if I am in the district, I will attend, whether they are early in the morning or late in the evening. We are going to make sure that we meet people where they are and accommodate them when we get information out. So whether we have multiple ways of getting the information, by Zoom, in person, flyers, texts, if we send things with a PDF, but also the hotline number that we put out, email, so that people will feel comfortable in whatever way they feel most comfortable getting us the information.
Rachel, I'm
Yes.
sorry, just pop in for a second. And we would also just invite everyone on the Zoom to let us know how your network would prefer to be contacted, what you think would be the most effective way for us to reach as many people as possible. We would really welcome your suggestions on that. We will come out and meet folks where they are. We will try to get as much language capacity as we can, but we really would like to engage this network into helping us reach populations who normally wouldn't be reached by our emails, our Facebook posts, Twitter, or any other social media that we would use. So we really invite your assistance on that.
Right. Another great question in the chat was Springfield appears to be, whoever wrote this, I'm like, I want to recruit you to come and work with us, but wrote Springfield appears to only have been the narcotics unit, and Worcester appears to be the entire Worcester Police Department. Don't necessarily read too much into that, you know, like one is good and one is bad. But when we receive complaints or when we go to open source information and we can see that it's contained to a specific, you know, unit, division, or branch, right? We wouldn't need to look beyond that. But when we get complaints that sort of are more general or writ large, we are hearing the entire department is doing the following. We start with this sort of sample size that we get the information from. And those were the two distinctions. Jennifer, if you want to jump in on this, because Jennifer is the chief of the unit, the civil rights unit in our office. With Worcester, you are absolutely right. The complaints we received or the open source information we received were exclusive almost to that one unit or department. And that's why we said we are looking at this one unit or department. When you get complaints that sort of trickle beyond that, we wouldn't just narrow it to that. So Jennifer, why don't you, if you have anything to add, and then Nicole, I'd love to turn it over to you if you have something to add with that.
Sure, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, I mean, as Rachel said, you know, each investigation is different. Each investigation is uniquely based on the facts that we learn about at the time that we sort of launch the investigation. And so, you know, broadly speaking, that's what helps us to determine whether we look at a particular unit or division or a whole department. You know, unfortunately, I can't say more beyond that just because we've just started our investigation, right? And as Rachel said, we haven't prejudged anything. We've just determined that we have enough to investigate. So, you know, I know it's frustrating when sometimes we sort of can't give more detailed answers, but we also want to protect the integrity of the investigation and to have folks really, you know, trust that this is going to be a fair and thorough and efficient investigation. So I guess all I would say is, you know, every department is different and all the facts are different. And sort of that's how we determined here to look at the whole department instead of one specific unit.
All right, let me make sure we see, there's other people on the call. The first assistant of the office, Josh Levy, who we lead this office together, is also on. Josh, I hate to put you on the spot, but is there anything you wanted to add to what we are saying? As I scroll through the chat and see there's anything else, or if there are any other questions?
I want to thank everyone for being on and for the interest that is obvious in this matter. So we look forward to diving in further and really appreciate everyone's being so engaged in these important issues.
Excellent. So let me give people one more chance if you want to. Okay. Great question. So we have a question from Giselle. Based on the investigation, if fault is found, how will the Worcester Police Department be held accountable? Giselle, what I'm going to try to do is take it away from Worcester and maybe have Nicole talk about some investigations they've done in the past where there were findings. How did you hold those police departments, things that are already done, investigations that are already completed? Could you give the people of Worcester a couple of examples of when something is found, when there's a consent decree or a settlement agreement? What are some of the ways that you can change a police department and hold them to a standard that we should all require?
Sure. If we find that there's a constitutional violation, what we try to do is work with the jurisdiction to resolve the violations and deficiencies that we found, typically in a court enforceable settlement agreement. And that is typically a consent decree that's overseen by a monitor. And the monitor is someone who is appointed by the court and helps to ensure that the police department is complying with the agreement that the parties have entered into. And so we're not saying that that would be the outcome necessarily in this case, but typically for the past several years, we have been entering into settlement agreements or court enforceable settlement agreements to address any sort of constitutional violations and deficiencies that we found. We have a settlement agreement, or consent decree, I should say, a court enforceable settlement agreement in Cleveland. We also have one in Baltimore. We have one in Ferguson. We have one in New Orleans. And those court enforceable settlement agreements have been really instrumental in ensuring that the practices, the unconstitutional practices that we found during our investigation are being corrected, and that the police department is now engaging in constitutional and effective policing. And what we've also seen in some of the jurisdictions where we have these settlement agreements and consent decrees, we see that the police departments are embracing these agreements wholeheartedly. And in some cases, they're actually even going above and beyond what the settlement agreement or consent decree requires in terms of reforms. And that's the ultimate goal here, is that we really want for the police departments to own this reform process and to implement these changes, not because there's this consent decree out there, not because there's a monitor and a judge out there, but because it's the right thing to do, and it's protecting the rights of the citizens, and it's building public confidence in the police.
Right. But what's great about what Nicole talked about in some of those spaces, and we can even talk about Springfield, where we are at the end, right? We had a court enforced consent decree or settlement agreement. The community is still involved in the process after that, right? We alert them. We have status conferences with the judge to see how far we've gone. Selecting that monitor, there was a public process that Jennifer and Michelle and others were involved in, where the community got to hear Jennifer. They got to submit questions for the two groups that ultimately we had to decide between who was going to be the monitor. We get a say in that with the community's involvement, and then so does, of course, the Department of Justice. And ultimately, we present that to a judge who has to approve the entire thing. But don't think that, well, we'll talk about Springfield. Springfield was, sort of, Jennifer, constitutional violations in the sense of excessive force or allegations of sort of over policing certain communities or discrimination based on race overwhelmingly in Springfield. We were able to really involve the Black community in particular in Springfield with respect to all of the processes that were happening, and had many, many community meetings in person and by Zoom, where I personally was there, and other times they were in the very capable hands of Jennifer and her team and the individuals from the Department of Justice. But it doesn't end when there's a court enforced order. There is still involvement in making sure that the city, because of course the mayor gets to choose who the chief of police is, that the city are held accountable and that the process is transparent. Okay. And looking at that, it's 4:56. I want to make sure, somebody just put the chat information back. Thank you, Millette. And so somebody asked, are the monitors from DOJ or another agency? Great question. Usually they are outside entities, but they have to be, or individuals, groups of individuals that operate in this space and have great experience in this space. It may be somebody who was a former chief of police, or somebody who has worked at the Department of Justice in Nicole's old job, or a former assistant United States attorney. It could be a community activist. It could be a group of people that put a proposal together to say, we'd like to be selected as a monitor. They have to be approved by the Department of Justice, right? So Nicole, do you want to just briefly talk in 30 seconds or less? I know we're getting close to 5. And I have to go pick up my kids, but can you just say the approval process of DOJ? We can't just say, oh, it's Rachel's cousin and she sort of likes them. They have to really meet the requirements of DOJ. So go ahead, Nicole. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, we have to pick a court monitor who is independent and impartial, and there's an entire process that we, the United States, and also the defendant, the person that we are we have negotiated this court enforceable agreement with in order to select the monitor. And so we just finished this process several months ago in Springfield, but they have to apply. They have to ensure that they are qualified for the position, that they have the experience needed in order to monitor a settlement agreement, and that they can do so in an effective manner. They have to interview with both DOJ and also the jurisdiction. And then once we interview them and we discuss their qualifications with them, we also provide the public an opportunity to meet with them, to ask them questions, and to get feedback from them about how they will conduct their monitoring responsibilities. Once we talk to them, we let the public have an opportunity to talk to them. We've gotten feedback from the public. Then we propose a particular candidate to the court and ask for the court to approve that particular monitor. And so it's a process, but it's a fair process. It's a transparent process. It's a process to be done to make sure that we have selected the most effective person or team to conduct these monitoring responsibilities. And then I just want to say there was one other question that I saw in the chat about how to get more information about the settlement agreements. What I'm going to do is place a link to Special Litigation's website, and it has more information about the pattern and practice investigations that we conduct and the settlement agreements that we've entered into with various jurisdictions, and also the investigations that we've opened.
Yeah, and they're really helpful. There are findings like that go through everything they looked at, which is one group of documents. And then the settlement agreements or the consent decrees are another group. So that's in the link. And the last thing, someone just joined, and we did say in the beginning, but we will repeat, I did offer the mayor, the city solicitor, the town manager, and the chief of police. We met with them just, about a half an hour or 45 minutes before we issued the press release to give them the courtesy of notice prior to just releasing that we were opening the investigation. We met with them earlier this early or late morning, early afternoon, and then we issued the press release at approximately, I think, Michelle, 12:45 today, but had a brief meeting with them before that. So it is 5 o'clock right now. We are going to make sure that we take screenshots of this entire chat. We are not recording. I will let you speak in a minute, Michelle. We are not recording anyone at all. If we are going to record things, we will make sure we alert you at the beginning of that, and you can choose to partake or not, but we did not record this call. Michelle, do you want to take us out?
Rachel, I was wondering if we could take one last question from Nicole Bell. I think her hand's been up for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nicole. I didn't see you. Of course we can.
Thanks.
Sorry, I just, I know that you said in the other investigations that the police were at the end kind of invested in the reform, right? And so I feel like part of in many areas of our community, people have tried to take like a restorative approach and like brought issues to the police department, such as, disparity in policing and, and all of those things. So when you're saying a court like an enforceable court order, what does that mean? So like if they're not invested in reform and right, so like what does it mean when it's enforceable? Like what does that mean?
That's great. So if, let's say hypothetically, in some of these documents, Nikki, that you will see that Nicole just, I think, linked in, if the settlement agreement says, hypothetically, we'll select a monitor by July 1st, 2022. We'll write a use of force policy and get it to the Department of Justice for review by this date. We'll do blah, 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 blah. Let's say I'm the town of Rachel Rollins and I'm blowing through deadlines. I'm ignoring phone calls. I'm continuing to doing all this other stuff. What happens is Jennifer and Michelle are in constant contact with Nicole. There's some things where we get it, right? Something happened, family emergency. On July 1st, you didn't do it. You got it in on July 3rd. wonderful, or even July 5th. But if you're blowing through deadlines, Nicole, we can go back to the judge who has approved that settlement agreement and say, Your Honor, the city of Rachel Rollins is not in compliance with this settlement agreement that you have approved. And then remember, this is not criminal, but they can be compelled by a court to actually engage. Nicole, luckily, Nikki, we don't have that example in Springfield, and I hope if we find anything, we will not be in that space in Worcester, but not Nikki Bell, but Nicole Porter. Can you give an example of, unfortunately, if that has happened while you were in your role, what happens when you go to court? What can the court do? What's the stick that the court has to say to that police department, you better do this right now? And not to mention, Nikki Bell, the media is on this call. So when the media starts reporting that the city of Rachel Rollins is blowing through deadlines, you know, the mayor appoints the chief of police, right? And if the community is upset about this enough, not only are we going to be holding them accountable in court, but the mayor is going to start getting backlash about the fact that their chief of police is blowing through deadlines. They aren't keeping this, you know, taking this as seriously as they need to. And there could be real implications in their lives, right? As a former elected official, Nikki, where they are no longer the mayor and there is a new chief of police, right? I'm not talking about Worcester or Springfield, but I'm talking generally about the way that this happens and why the press is important with respect to notifying people of things that are happening. But Nicole Porter, can you talk just briefly about when people are not in compliance, what do you do and what have you seen courts do?
Sure. Well, one of the things that can be done is that the court